Hey, Drew, good morning, Robb Moffett. Guys, I was going to be talking about frugal tips this morning. For instance, on holiday weekends, you can go on a Monday or Tuesday on Walmart, get chickens for $2 cooked. A bunch of other really inexpensive frugal tips. But I was thinking, well, I don't know if people want to hear that. They're probably tired of tips on how to scrimp and save and sleep in their car and survive on cardboard. You know, we're done. We're done. I don't know if I want to do those videos anymore. Instead of videos on how to survive being poor, let's do videos on how we could live like the rich being poor. I don't know. We'll cut that out. Let's do a short story. A true short story. I was thinking about this the other day. It's Miami, winter or fall, 1960, which is like 100 years ago. I'm living in Miami. My family, 601 Northeast, first place, number 2. I remember that because when you're in kid and they send you to school first grade, the teacher always asks you your address. They ask all the kids in the class what their address is. My address is 601 Northeast, first place, number 2. And everybody turns around and looks at me, and the teacher says, "You've got that wrong. There isn't 2 first places." It's like, but in Miami, there is 2 first places, Northeast. That's where I lived. Everybody laughed at me. That's when I first realized I wasn't that crazy about people in authority making fun of me. My brothers and I were going to the movies. We were going to go see The Attack of the 50-Foot Man. We lived in a Coral Rock house in Miami. I say that because, like, I'm proud of it. I had nothing to do with it. I did not help my parents build the house I was born in. There's probably less than a dozen people in Miami that ever lived in the Coral Rock house. 2-story. We, my brothers and I, we would walk around everywhere. We didn't have bikes. And to get to the movie theater, you had to cut through yards because we, as kids, would go in a straight line. We'd go behind buildings and factories and all sorts of things. 2 blocks east from the house, there was like a commercial area where there was manufacturing going on. And we walked through there, then through behind people's yards, and we'd go over to the Rosetta. There was 2 theaters nearby. One was on the boulevard, which later became a nudie X-rated theater, and the Rosetta, which eventually shut down, and it's still empty now to this day. It's been empty for 40 years. I don't know what the deal is with that. But it was winter time. That only means it didn't rain. It was still warm, but the sun was going down early, so we had to get back before it got dark. We went to see the 50-Foot Man. The war had been over, Second World War, just like 15 years earlier. And there had been some atomic bombs exploded, and everything in the news was all atomic. Everything was atomic. It was like people were fascinated by it. I remember going to the shoe store with my mom, Buster Brown, and they would put the kids' feet in this box, and it had like a radioactive fluoroscope. You could see the bones of the kids' feet to see if they fit in the shoes. We weren't afraid of radioactivity, but at the same time, we had a fascination with it. And the science fiction movies would use it to their benefit to sell their movies. And the 50-Foot Man was an Army man that got exposed to radioactivity in a blast nuclear test, and he grew to 50 feet. So we went to see him. I'm pretty sure it was wintertime because in the summertime we would go to the boulevard and they would let us in with 6 bottle caps from RC Crown, Royal Crown Cola, which was a knockoff to Pepsi and Coca-Cola in Miami. In order to get the bottle caps, we didn't buy sodas. Rarely. You might get a knee-high orange or a knee-high grape or a little peewee. But they had a big metal cooler with ice, and they kept the sodas in there. And there was a little container where you opened the bottle, and the bottle cap would fall into the container. And the store owner let us get in there and go through all the bottle caps and find the RC Crown. And we would use those to go in the summertime, and we would see like Sinbad with a super film technology where he would throw the teeth from the dragon down and a skeleton would appear, and it was just unforgettable. But yeah, we went in the wintertime to see the Attack of the 50-Foot Man going through people's yards and the factories. And we got in there and we saw the movie, and it was kind of sad. This was the man, he was minding his own business. He's in the Army and he gets exposed to radiation, and now he grows to 50 feet and he goes a little crazy in the head. I never could understand when he grew how come his clothes grew too. I think he just had on short pants, but still, like, how did his pants grow when from the radioactivity? That just didn't make any sense to me. And they would give him turkeys, and they would be like little this size, and he would throw things at the people, and didn't end too well for him. It was a little scary, but not that scary. We started walking home to the west, and the sun was going down. And like I said, we would always walk through people's yards and stuff. In fact, we like walking behind buildings like the bakery. They would throw out stuff, old bakery goods. You'd get the honey buns and things. We kept going. Finally, we were getting close to home, and it's almost dark. And we were approaching one building that I was really afraid of, and my brothers were too. It was a little factory that made caskets, and it was scary. And we'd never actually been there at nighttime. And they had these dumpsters out front and pieces of wood sticking up and yarn and stuff on spools. And but it was just still really creepy to us. And the closer we got, the more scared we got. And finally, we got really scared. We're like, there's the building. We're walking to the west, and we're walking past it, and we keep looking like, is something going to happen? And the more we looked and were apprehensive, the more scared we got. And it was almost dark, but there was still sunlight coming from the west as the sun was almost going down. And we finally passed the building inside a big sigh of relief. And we kind of turned around and looked where we were going now, and over the top of the building in front of us, which was one story, was a giant. Everybody froze in their track. I remember like my whole body felt like numb. I couldn't move my legs. And there was this big giant looking down at us. And we had just seen the Attack of the 50-Foot Man. And what it was, there was, I think, Donnelly Advertising that puts up the big billboard signs. Occasionally they would put one up that had the Jolly Green Giant. It was like a big plywood cutout of a giant. And or even like they had the Marlboro Man too. And but this one was a Jolly Green Giant. And he was up behind the building, like sticking up, looking down at us, and silhouetted with the sun like coming behind him. And it was really scary, really scary. So eventually we moved. the neighborhood wasn't that good. We moved, not because the neighborhood was bad, because my parents divorced. And eventually, um, I would move to different towns in Miami and different schools. And then when the rent came due, we'd go to another place. Eventually, we end up in the housing projects, which was kind of bad. And slowly, after we got kicked out of the project, it's another story. Um, we eventually worked our way back up to upper lower class and continued on our journey. And one day, one of my brothers went back to visit and look at the old house. Really cool old house. And the neighborhood had changed, and there was a black supremacist group that had sprung up in Miami. The leaders were community organizers. They were getting paid by the city, but at the top level of the organization, they were there was a cult, and they were killing people. And you would progress higher in the cult if you killed people. If you killed white people, you progressed up even higher. They killed like 11 or 12 people in Miami. I think their leader got out of prison, like 10 or 15 years ago, which is crazy. But they had one of their headquarters was a Saxony hotel, just 2 blocks east from where we lived. And my brother had taken his old Volkswagen Beetle. He wasn't mechanically inclined. Somebody had sold him this car, and it was beat up. The shock absorbers and steering dampers, they weren't. It was rusted out, and so they weren't connected. And we need to go over. And I got under his car and looked at, you need to just drive this home slow and never drive it again. But anyway, he was there, and he was standing out front of the house, and he just had some idea that something was behind him. He turned around, and there was this black guy with a big rock over his head, like that, gonna hit my brother in the head with the rock. And I'm pretty sure he was with the Always. And my brother never went back. So the attack of the 50-foot man. I don't have a moral of this story. I don't have a way to neatly tie it up. I don't have an ending, but the only thing I can say is that in Miami at that time, it was like 15 years after the war had ended. And even though in many ways Miami was a paradise at that time for most people, there was still a lot of racial stuff going on. So if you were a different racial group or ethnicity, maybe it wasn't so great to live in Miami at that time. But for just regular working class white people, it was a paradise at that time in the 60s, early 60s. But there was a lot of leftover stuff from the war that was still percolating through daily life that doesn't exist anymore for good reason. But as an example, during the war, they had these big giant searchlights to find airplanes that were bombers coming over, and the military had them, and they were left over after the war, and the businesses would use them Like if they had a grand opening for a business in Miami, you would see at nighttime these big searchlights lighting up the clouds and going all across the sky. And 15 years earlier, they would have been looking for bombers. But now it's just a grand opening of a carpet store in Miami. You also had like either every Saturday or every other Saturday, you had the air raid siren to go off to let you know that the Russians had just launched their missiles and you better head for cover. One day I was downtown in Miami when I was a little kid, and it went off at a time when it shouldn't have gone off. And everybody just kept walking, and I was thinking, like, is this it? We also had, shortly after the Cuban Missile Crisis, where the town just filled up with the military. And we were worried about getting a nuclear strike. The teachers would tell you about to get under your desk or to stay away from the windows and so on. You had people trying to build air raid or bomb shelters in Miami where the water table was like 2 feet. You couldn't dig very deep. But it was a different time. Most of the places had no air conditioning. The first air conditioning I ever saw was a little barber shop, a little hole in the wall, not much bigger than my kitchen, that had a air conditioner almost as big as my refrigerator. Because there wasn't any air conditioning, I just remember Miami smelled different. It had a tropical smell. You could smell the plants and the trees and the flowers, and you could hear the birds. And you could feel the sweat and the heat. Or when it rained, you could feel the cool and the smell of the rain. And in the wintertime, the windows were open and the breeze was coming through the house. And you felt alive again. You were connected to the real world. Unlike the 50-foot man. Guys, I don't have an ending for this story. I'm sorry. I keep thinking of trying to have an ending, but I don't. If you stayed with me this long, I wish I could give you 6 RC Royal Crown bottle caps to go see Sinbad the Sailor. It's been a pleasure, guys. Take care. See you out there.